Bonjour à tous. Welcome. This is the information session for the winter 2025 call for applications to the Innovate Pilot Fund. Thank you for your interest in the Pilot Fund and into Innovate. I will go through some of the components of the application. We want to drive you all to be successful. So thank you for your attention. This audio is only available in English, unfortunately, but it is closed captioned in English and subtitled in French. So you can find a way to activate that below. You will see those French subtitles. So just some quick introductions. My name is Leo Mui. I am the network manager for Innovate, and joining me for a later portion of this webinar is Christian Howe, the project manager for Innovate. And Innovate is Canada's image-guided therapy and AI membership network. We support Canadian IHT companies and academic institutions to go faster and farther to build and validate medical technologies, positively impact healthcare system, and create high-quality jobs. And our mission is to connect, educate, and invest in the industry's brightest minds and most promising ventures in order to improve the patient outcomes and fuel economic development in Canada. We are hosted at the Sunnybrook Research Institute right here in Toronto, Ontario, and our funding is provided in part through the Government of Canada's Strategic Innovation Fund. So we thank them for their support. So, as mentioned, we provide funding, networking, and training opportunities. I'm going to be talking a lot about our funding opportunities for the rest of the time. So allow me a little bit of time to talk about what we do for our other two components. So we host and partner with a lot of organizations to host events, seminars, talks around Canada in IGT and MedTech. And our team attends a lot of different MedTech conferences and events, both here and abroad. So there's always an opportunity somewhere to meet us in person. As well, our training programs are really MedTech and image-guided therapy focused, and it includes our flagship Medventions immersive MedTech commercialization training fellowship for early stage professionals. Go on our website or Google Medventions to find out more about this really cool aspect of Innovate. And just to speak a little bit about our events, you can always find out about them by joining us, by joining our monthly newsletter at innovate.ca. Scroll to the bottom, there'll be a big button that says sign up for a newsletter. We only send emails out once a month, and for big news like funding announcements, that is the best way to keep in touch with us. Coming up, we are hosting a joint symposium with the Imaging Network of Ontario, IMNO, on March 5th to 6th at the Westin Harbour Castle in Toronto. You can Google IGT IMNO and you'll find that project. So if you're interested, I'd love to meet you there. So this is a map from early January. We have 108 members back then, added, I think, a couple since. We have academic institutions and SMEs and larger companies from coast to coast, and hopefully one day to the other coast as part of our federal network for image-guided therapy. We're very excited to be able to have representations from almost all corners of this country and really feel privileged to be available here to connect people from different places in Canada who are working on similar things with similar goals. Before I really get into the meat of the presentation, some important notes. So the information that I'm presenting in this webinar and on this slide is only meant to be general information about this upcoming pilot fund opportunity. At the end of the day, all ultimate recipients of our funding is bound by the terms and conditions as set out by the Sunnybrook Research Institute and/or the Government of Canada through this ultimate recipient agreement that you will sign to get your funding. And in case of any discrepancies, the agreement will be treated as correct. This covers any mistake I may make in talking at you today, which I hope I don't make too many. But another important note, at the end of this webinar, maybe tomorrow, you'll receive a copy of these slides, and they should include links where you can download directly some important documents related to this application. You can also find these links at innovate.ca/funding. Scroll down and you will see these 5 documents available for download in both English and French. And please do go through these documents carefully as they include important information and things that can help your application. So the pilot fund, what you're here for. This is reimbursement funding for commercialization-focused R&D in image-guided therapy and artificial intelligence. In essence, we want to contribute to your R&D work in image-guided therapy by contributing up to 1/3 of your eligible project costs in forms of reimbursement. So your project can request contributions between $100,000 to $150,000 max. One stipulation, talking about our federal nature, is that 1/3 of Innovate's contributions must go to a collaborators that's based outside of Ontario. So if you're not based outside of Ontario and all your partners are based not in a province that's not Ontario, you're fine, you're good to go. But any project that has an Ontario basis, we want to make sure that you do look outside our province for collaborators across the country. Projects, this is collaborative research, so we were looking for 2 to 4 team members for an eligible project. So eligible collaborators are Canadian corporations, academic institutions like universities, hospitals, research institutes, other not-for-profit organizations. As long as they are incorporated in Canada, they're generally considered to be eligible. Each project, however, must involve at least one Canadian SME, and each project must involve at least one collaborator outside of Ontario, again, to fulfill the requirements I mentioned earlier. So all applications are completed on our funding portal at innovate.smartsimple.ca. Everything is handled through that portal. And if you're lucky enough to be selected for funding, all your reporting and post-project tracking, that's all done in that same portal. So it will contain all of the project records in one place. Very convenient for you, very convenient for us. Applications must be submitted before 11:59 p.m. Pacific on April 2nd, 2025. That's a hard deadline. We will not accept any late applications for any reasons. And lastly, this is a competitive application process, so there is no guarantee for funding. Looking at a little bit about our network, so far we have funded 83 projects completed by 108 of our project members. And together they are spending about $117 million in the IGT field in Canada. So this is where we'd love to see economic development happen in our country, and this much of this $117 million is actually expenditures that are spent within Canada, and so I'm very happy to see that our R&D projects are really succeeding in stimulating our economy. And to help with those expenditures, we have already committed $37.4 million towards these projects that are up and running or have already completed. There's about $1.8 million remaining where we've committed to projects that are pending and have not started yet, which leaves us with about $1.6 million plus or minus available for this call for applications. And So this data is from January 2nd. Numbers change every day. So don't hold us to this $1.6 million mark. It could be less, it could be more by the time we select projects. I'm going to walk through the project selection timeline just to give you an idea of what to expect. So today, February 12th, 2025, we are hosting this funding webinar. The next important date, I'm going to repeat this one more time, 11:59 p.m. Pacific on April 2nd, 2025. That is the submission deadline. The system will not let you submit after that time, so please be careful and be aware that you're ready to submit by that deadline. In the subsequent month and a half, we will go through all applications, share them with our reviewers. So we have a panel of independent subject matter experts and medtech commercialization masters that will read through all applications, evaluate them and score them. And then we will all meet together at a review meeting at the end of May, where we will discuss and rank all projects and send our recommendations to our management board. And our management board in mid-June will hold their project selection meeting where they will make the final decisions to fund or not to fund a particular project. And then shortly afterwards, we will notify all applicants, all lead applicants of the results. And for those who are successful, they will receive a draft copy of our ultimate recipient agreement for their comments. So for this round, the earliest possible project start date is July 1st, 2025. And the latest possible project end date is December 31st, 2026. Just note that there will be no opportunity for extensions beyond December 31st, 2026, as we have a limited amount of time at the end of our funding cycle with the government. And so you have to be wary that you have to be aware that you have to spend all of your project funds by that date, or you will lose that amount from your allocation. So the date that we want to target receiving red lines and comments to our ultimate recipient agreement (URA) is around the third week of July. Note that that means that if you have a project start date of July 1st, there may be a few weeks where you are starting your project prior to the signing of the agreement. You do that at your own risk, because until you actually sign it, we cannot guarantee that you will get reimbursed for your costs. And do note that the URA is pretty standard. We have a lot of flow down requirements from the government, so there's not a lot of wiggle room that we can have. So we really want to make sure that you talk to your project partners and make sure they understand the URA and what's required in it prior to even submitting the application, because we don't want to waste time at the end after your project has been selected to then realize that you are not able to sign the contract. And if you do sign, then the earliest quarterly reimbursement claim submission will be due on October 30th. So we do this on a regular cycle every quarter. And so for October 30th, you will submit all expenditures incurred in the July to September period. And on here, I have a expected payment date of March 30th, 2026 for when everything has been verified, all the costs have been verified by us and the government. That's a very conservative estimate. I would say that it's usually won't take that long to get everything verified, but times do vary. But I will let you know that the last October 30th claim made in 2024, we're paying out those amounts today on February 12th. So that gives you an estimate of a real example of payment time. So let's talk about whether your project will fit with our mandate. So we have a pretty broad view of image-guided therapy here at Innovate. And I would say for these projects, we take three basic tests for what fit is. So first, do you use images? So you don't have to build hardware to capture the image. You just need to work with images, obtain some other means. And whether or not you process the images yourself using AI or advanced data capabilities, or it's some sort of plugin that does the processing, that will likely be okay with our definition of what AI and advanced data capabilities would be. And lastly, we need to make sure that whatever you're proposing has some direct connection to treatment planning, treatment monitoring. It shouldn't just be a straight diagnostic play. So a few examples here under the headers. These points are just examples. We're not trying to force you into these buckets. There are always creative applications that we get with every one of our. So in terms of images taken or formed, I would say the vast majority of the applications we get are from traditional or typical medical imaging techniques such as X-ray, CT, MR, PET, ultrasound. We are seeing more and more uses of optical cameras, such as from camera phones, larger cameras to take sort of visual images or videos for some sort of treatment decision. And of course, there are always more obscure methods to capture an image. For example, we have funded a project that uses mass spec to create an image of sorts. In terms of processing, we've seen examples where people are enhancing the images being captured by denoising things, making image capture faster, or we work with images after they've been captured and do things like automated segmentation, measurements, labeling, risk scoring, or creating reports, or taking already segmented and labeled data and using that to do some sort of analysis for treatment planning support, treatment guidance, etc. And lastly, as I mentioned already, we're looking for some sort of direct connection to treatment. So it either whatever your output, it either informs, guides, or tracks treatment. And in terms of treatment, your project can impact in one or more of these three stages. Pre-treatment, where you're looking at treatment planning or prediction of a response to treatment, deciding which patients should be treated or not. Or very classically, IGT, it can happen intra-treatment, where you have direct guidance, navigation of a procedure, real-time characterization and interpretation of tissues and margins for in a resection type treatment, clinical decision making in real time, and also post-treatment. We see this less, but measurement of response to treatment and sort of adherence to rehabilitation. So here are some sort of fictitious project ideas that we can look at different aspects of to determine fit. So the one here, you can think about MR-guided surgical robots that uses AI to reduce healthy tissue damage during resection. That's very classically IGT, and that would really hit right in the middle of the target board. And then, something that's a little bit, further out of the circle, think about using AI algorithms that can use ultrasound images to predict response to drug treatment because of certain imaging biomarkers. That's not classically IGT, but it's still on our board. It's still a good fit with us. And sort of like, on the periphery, of our targets would be something like a smartphone app that tracks physical therapy adherence through video assessment. Not saying that that's not a fit, but really that's a little bit beyond what our core focus is. So really, we are expecting a big impact, a very compelling case. So you have to work a little harder if you're sort of in that outside ring. In your application, you have to work a little harder to convince our reviewers that this is something that we want to support. And of course, there are projects that are, non-imaging based and doesn't really directly correlate with treatment, even though it's very important. Even with a perfectly written applications, it won't be funded because it's completely off the board. And you know, talking about sort of fit at that review meeting, we will sort of look at all the projects, kind of where they fit in this target, and the ones that hit in right in the middle, the ones that are greatest fit, they still have a barrier to cross, to get funded, but that barrier may be slightly lower than the ones that are in the outer rungs. So I would always say if you have any questions about whether your idea is a fit for us, contact us. You'll get our emails at the end of this presentation. Email us so that we can have a call about that and determine the fit prior to you putting in a lot of effort in creating the application. I don't want to waste your time, and I want to make sure that if we can, we'll fund 100% of the applications that come in because of their high quality and high fit. Let's talk about what the projects should be about. So, repeating myself here, but I do want to get this across. Applications must clearly describe a project that integrates AI into an IGT application. There must also be a clear commercial impact potential, and applicants must explain the pathway to commercialization, especially for early stage companies or academic-led applications. Applications should include some detail on how data and images are what data images are required for the project and how you plan to obtain them. The project achievables should be appropriate for a 9 to 15-month timeline. And for projects led by an academic institution, we want to see a clear engagement with and commitment from your industry collaborator. This is not meant for basic laboratory research. This is a commercialization and economic development fund. So we really want to make sure that there is a clear pathway for commercialization. And for early stage startups, we need to be able to see that there is financial capability in your company to conduct this project. So you don't need to necessarily have all the money for this project in your bank account just sitting and waiting, but we want to read about your plans on raising sufficient funds so that you don't have to abort this project midway. So broadly, the the project, officially has to fit under one of these two categories, but really we're looking for projects that are in development between TRLs 1 and 7, right? So that's really the limit of what we can consider. And for everything that you want to be reimbursed for, it has to be linked to one of these 12 very broad project activities. And just want to note that commercialization and development, business development and marketing activities are absolutely needed for commercialization. However, those are not reimbursable through this fund. But we do want to make sure that if you have key commercialization milestones, such as a fundraising or some sort of customer engagement, include those key milestones or one or two of them in the application, but just know that we won't be able to reimburse you for costs associated with those activities. Our budget cost categories are fairly typical, but sometimes the way we calculate it is different than grants that you may have seen from other organizations. So for direct labor, this is solely for on-project hours only. So hours in which your staff are working on this Innovate project. You need to track that time with a timesheet. The timesheet needs to be signed every quarter before submission because we are not paying for your staff's general time. And their hourly rate is calculated using either their actual hourly wage that's stipulated in their contract or pay stubs. If they're salaried, we take their annual salaried and divide it by the number of working hours in a year to determine the hourly rate. And the amount that you will budget for excludes holiday pay, vacation days, benefits, and such. Only the sort of the gross salary and wages for your employees. We've seen cases where companies have submitted hourly rates for their employees, especially the early stage companies where hourly rates go up and down from 20 to 50 to $40 month after month after month. That will cause that cost to be flagged, and you'll have to have a compelling reason for why that's the case. So really want to keep consistent hourly rates. Obviously, they can go up throughout project because wages go up, but it shouldn't fluctuate too much without cause. Subcontractors and consultants, just want to highlight some common examples here. So patent agents and lawyers, we're one of the few funds I believe out there that will directly pay for um, uh, uh, patenting and protecting IP that comes from this project. We have also seen companies request for regulatory consultants, and any graduate students stipends also go into this category. One note that I want to make is that one organization or one collaborator on this project cannot also be a contractor. So you have to pick the best way to recognize another entity that you work with, either as a recipient of our funds or as a contractor. They cannot be both on the same project. Materials and equipment, pretty typical, so I'm going to skip over the details, but there are details in the guide for applicants that you can read through. Other direct costs, it's other costs that are project related. So software subscriptions, we can pay for project specific software that you need, but not for general software like Microsoft 365 app or Zoom. Those type of general software is not included as a direct cost in a program. But any filing fees that you pay to a Canadian, American, or foreign IP offices, that's eligible and under other direct costs. And everything else that's related to your project is called an indirect cost, and it's covered using a fixed, automatically calculated category called indirect costs overhead. Unlike other programs, we don't have a single number, 15%, 25%, or whatever that defines how much indirect costs are. It is really based on your direct labor cost and other costs in a fairly complex formula. It is automatically calculated for you on the budget workbook. So play around with that and you can see what additional money you will receive for indirect costs. So one thing that I really want to highlight here is that interdepartmental purchases are considered to be indirect costs in this program. So what these are, so a lot of universities, PIs will pay an internal invoice to an imaging department for use of a research magnet or to a device development workshop to access tools and equipment in those places. Those types of internal invoices are not considered direct costs in this program. So you have to know that and let your academic partners know that they cannot claim directly for those costs. If you have any questions on that, contact us and we can chat with you about that. Cost eligibility, we have again a 3-point test. I love these 3-point tests: real, reasonable, and incremental. So real means that these projects have to be actual expenditures that are traceable through some sort of financial paper trail. So we want to see proof of spending, timesheets, pay stubs, invoices, and receipts. Just think about what you submit for your own reimbursement request to your company when you spend your personal money. That's sort of like the level that we need for every quarter. Occasionally, there are audits from the government where we will require even things like screenshots of your bank account to prove that a certain payment had been made. So please only claim actual expenditures. Reasonable is, something is a cost that in a similar context, a prudent, normal person would think that it's a reasonable price to pay for a certain cost. And incremental means that it is just this is something that's an additional cost that you're incurring because of this project, and that it's not some sort of base cost that you would have to pay for anyways in the running of your company. So, as I mentioned, we will require proof of spending for these costs for every quarterly claim. We do check them to make sure they match what you claim. And with very few exceptions, ultimate recipients in the same project cannot buy goods and services from each other. You can talk to us if you think that your situation requires it, but there's limited exceptions for that. In-kind support is not a thing with Innovate. So anybody that gives you advice and they value themselves at $500 an hour, unless you pay them $500 an hour, you cannot count that as an in-kind support because that's unaccounted labor. Taxes, all sorts of taxes, sales taxes, all those things are not eligible to be claimed. Travel, hospitality, and any room rental expenditures are not eligible to be claimed. And at the end of the day, all costs are subject to verification and audit by the government. So a common term that we use is a contribution ratio. It's not too complex of a concept, but I will go through sort of the limits of our projects here. So as I've said many times, overall, Innovate can cover up to 1/3 of your project's eligible costs. So that's a 33.33% contribution ratio for your project. You don't get any extra points by coming in with a high cost project and then asking for a low contribution ratio. I would recommend, it's not written in stone or anything, but I would recommend something between 25 and 33%. That's kind of like a good sweet spot for us. For industry collaborators, we can pay between 10% of their costs and 50% of their costs. So every collaborator on your project must receive at least 10%. For industry collaborators, we can reimburse up to 50% of their costs through our contributions. And for academic collaborators, we can reimburse up to 100% of their costs as our contribution. But remember, again, no matter how you structure these, for the overall project level, you have to make sure that you're at or below 1/3. Budget workbook will calculate this for you. And I'll show you an example of that in one moment. So we also have pretty typical stacking limits for other government sourced funds. So this covers all federal, provincial, and municipal level grants or funds that you'll receive for this project in addition to Innovates. For industry collaborators, including Innovates portion, you can cover up to 75% of your project costs with government sourced funds. The rest you have to cover on your own from private sources. For academic collaborators, you will have to, we can cover up to 100% of your project costs between Innovate and possibly some other government entity. Very important that you go and check the agreements for other grants to make sure that their funds allow this type of usage. We can't judge that for you. And just to note, the application will ask you for the sources that you expect to get the 2/3 of the project costs that we are not covering. So please detail where that money is coming from in the application. So say your project gets selected and you're ready to claim. So approximately, 2 to 3 months after claiming, and you see the government approval, we will then request you to send us an invoice for whatever was approved for your reimbursement claim, less a 10% holdback. So we'll send this invoice request to each collaborator on your project because we will pay them directly. We charge a 5% admin fee on top of whatever on what we give to you as a contribution as you receive these reimbursement. And so for a project that asks for the full $150,000, we will charge a total of $7,500 in admin fees. But we don't charge that upfront or anything. For every dollar we give you, we will ask you to pay us a nickel. So this is really meant to pay for network activities that are not fully paid out by the contributions from the government to us. And it includes a reserve for the continuation of Innovate after government funding so that we can continue our work even without government funding. So this admin fee can be paid by either one recipient, spread amongst all ultimate recipients. There's a space for you to specify who should pay this admin fee. We have a lot of cases where companies who want to work with academic labs take on all of the admin fees, but that's up to you and your collaborators. The admin fee cannot simply just be deducted from the approved claim amount. We have to give you the funds and you have to pay us separately as a sort of two different transactions. And the 10% holdback I mentioned earlier will be paid out to you once your quarters reporting requirements are all checked out and you have paid the admin fee. So I will take a sip of water and then just quickly go through budget workbook. I think it's pretty intuitive, but I want to highlight where you can sort of some commonly asked questions. So the project number for your application and then subsequently for your project will be assigned automatically on that Innovate funding portal on Smart Simple. So it's an 8-digit number starting with 2025, 7, because this is the 7th funding round, XXX. So you put that number into your project budget. That's really important because when we download this workbook, we need to be able to identify which project it's connected to. And then you can select your intended start and end dates using drop downs in this menu. And then there's a table where you can list all your collaborators. And so here, please put in the legal organization name rather than the PI at the institute that you're working with. So these should be organization names here. And for organizations that are in multiple provinces, we would really recommend that you put in where the organization is incorporated or is based, because that will help us with our calculations. The second tab you'll see in your budget workbook is where you will actually build out your project financials. And so you will see that, there are different colored cells. All the blue cells are editable and you can type things into it. You can insert lines and delete lines if you need to. So these are editable, but the others are not. Please don't try to unlock the spreadsheet and enter your own numbers because it may break things. All the yellow numbers are automatically calculated, for example. So if you have a cost that is split between two ultimate recipients, just enter the cost separately and then indicate which ultimate recipient is paying what amount. And so the ultimate recipient making the expenditure is the one that actually pays an employee. So they are the ones that issue the pay stubs, T4s, or they actually pay the invoice for a purchase. If in a case where like a company wants to send cash to a university to pay for a postdoc at a lab, that postdoc would be considered as a university cost because they're being paid directly by the university, but by the university, and the company cash transfers outside the purview of our project does not need to be reported. We also prefer that if you put in position titles, descriptive position titles, rather than individuals' names in the direct labor section, just because people come and go, and so titles are more generalized. In the budget justification, we just need about a sentence from you to explain how each cost is linked to your project. If it's something that you think is a little weird, that we may ask questions about, you can add another sentence or two, but you should keep this budget justification short. And for direct labor costs, exclude any benefits. As I mentioned earlier, that's not considered direct cost. And any sales taxes should be removed for budgeted materials, equipment, and other costs. Scrolling down that same tab, you'll see some summary tables about what each, for example, here in this orange table, you will see what each ultimate recipient should expect from Innovate. And in these blue cells, you can specify the contribution for each one, for each party. So you can play around with the numbers to see to get to the result that you want, but always make sure that the overall project contribution ratio is at or below 1/3. And then in the pink table, you can indicate which ultimate recipient should pay for the admin fee. There's a very handy error check table. Just if you scroll down the tab, everything should be green before you submit. And if you do get an error, it should appear as red, and it will give you a hopefully helpful message on how to fix the error. But if you can't figure that out, email us. We're here to help. Okay, I've yammered a lot. But I'll just go through some key tips before I turn it over to Christian to talk about questions that you may have. Carefully read the guide for applicants. It's there for you. There's all the information basically is laid out in there. So make sure that you understand it. If you have any other questions, ask us. Get started with your application and your budget workbook early. So if there's any questions you have, you can ask us. You can imagine how inundated our inbox is the week before an application is due. So please allow yourself more time. We're not saying that you need to submit weeks ahead, but get ready to. Engage collaborators early. You need to get signed letters of support from each one of them. So you don't want to rush that purpose because sometimes you need to find the right person to sign it, and that will take some time. And really, demonstrate that you are and have been engaged with them, and you're ready to conduct this project together. You can go on to Smart Simple right now and create an account to reduce any last-minute stress. You can start a draft application, poke around in there to see how things work. One thing I'd like to ask you for is please put in a working phone number on your profile and application. I really like to call applicants to tell them whether or not they were successful in funding. I think that's a little bit more personal than getting an email. But if you don't include a phone number or I can't reach you, then unfortunately you will find out by email. So make sure that all your collaborators understand the content of the ultimate recipient agreement. And for large organizations, make sure that their legal departments understand what's in there. We don't want a lengthy contract negotiation process after project selection. And yeah, plan to submit your applications, maybe a couple days early, just in case something doesn't work. The deadline is at 11:59 Pacific, which is 3 a.m. Here in Eastern time. I guarantee you I will not be awake to help you at that time. And a last bit of tips, when you're drafting the application, go to the guide for applicants, read through the evaluation criteria that we give to our reviewers, and make sure that you're answering the questions that our reviewers would be looking for. With that said, your answers do have character limits, so you're not able to address everything and put all details possible in your answers. So convey the key aspects of your project with just sufficient detail to convince us that you know what you're talking about, that the project and our funds are in good hands, and that there's a decent chance of success, and that your project will eventually bring benefits to Canada. Reviewers will read your entire proposal, so you don't need to repeat yourself in different answers unnecessarily. There are places to upload pictures, so if you have really cool sample images, show it to us. In terms of tech development, we're not really looking for cutting edge AI algorithms to be developed. We're looking really to see how you can use AI as a tool to improve image guided therapy. We ask for key performance indicators such as jobs created, sales, patents, etc. But please keep in mind, this is a 9 to 15-month project. Make sure they're realistic because we will evaluate your project, again, your actual achievables against these KPIs at the end of your project. So you don't want to be too far off. This funding is to create benefits to Canada, mainly through commercialization and economic impact, but of course, impact to patients as well. So convince us that your project is not just advancing technologies for fun or for academic sake, and that it will result in a strong product that will hit the markets. And amongst other questions, my favorite question is on risks. So you get 2,000 characters to where you can put on a reviewer's hat and address any shortcomings you may think the reviewer would see in your project. It's a great section, fairly free form. Different size companies, different types of applicants will approach it differently, but really think about if you were a reviewer and you read your application, what questions they may have and how can you address it. It's a great place for you to really shine. And lastly, I've said this already, but you do need signed letters of support from all of your collaborators. And you need to upload that with your application. So please start working with them now, start collecting these letters. We can't give extensions because one of your collaborators failed to send you their signed letters. All right, I'm done my presentations. And I know that there's probably some questions that have been posed, but I do have some frequently asked questions that we've seen, and I'll ask Christian to come back and read out some of these questions, and I'll answer them, and then we'll get to yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Leo. So, yeah, I'm gonna looking at the Q&A now. And so the first question we have is, do we have to have a collaborator from Sunnybrook?
Absolutely not.
And
So we are the host for Innovate, the funding program. We would love for you to consider working with our scientists, but that is not an obligation.
Thank you. Then the next question, they're wondering that the grant supporting research, their project perhaps uses image-guided angiography in surgery. They would like to know more about the commercialization focus of their research. Does it mean on completion of their research project, does Innovate or Sunnybrook, will they have any rights on anything that comes out of the research project?
Yeah. So Sunnybrook in its capacity as a funder for your project does not will not claim any of the IP. Obviously, if your project is working with an Innovate scientist, then Sunnybrook's IP policies will apply. But yeah, we could. I think the best way is to take a look at the ultimate recipient agreement template that's on our website. That's one of those key documents, and look through the IP provisions, and you will see you'll get an answer for that.
All right, the next question asks if there were cameras used to improve sensors and predictions along with AI, does that sound like a fit, even if it might not have anything to do with direct treatment?
Yeah, I mean, we would like to see some sort of direct linkage to treatment, but you know, if you think that you may be a fit, let us know by email, and we need more details to answer that.
The next question then asks if studies that are conducted partially in the US be funded.
So every project can spend up to 10% of their project costs outside of Canada. And so you can absolutely do a part of your studies outside of Canada. If it goes beyond the 10% limit, we just will stop reimbursing you at that 10% limit. So it's fine to do that.
Next question asks how large is the application package?
Yeah, you can take a look at the key documents. It's not a long applications. The joke around here is that, and it's true. We've heard complaints on that it's both too short and too long. So we probably are in the right space. I don't have the exact numbers of the number of questions or number of total characters, but it's not too arduous.
The next question asks, are in-kind contributions from partners or industry collaborators eligible towards the 66, the two-thirds matching funding?
Yeah, I kind of addressed that earlier. We don't, we try not to use the word in kind at all, just because there's so many different definitions of it. So if your partner is providing their staff time to the project, and that staff time can be traced through a timesheet, and they're willing to share that staff member's pay stub so that we can verify how much they get paid, then that staff member's time on the project is an eligible direct labor cost. In other grants, that may be considered in-kind contributions. But yeah, here we really look at expenditures. We don't look at in-kind contributions or cash contributions. It's all about expenditures that are traceable, real, reasonable, and forget what my last one was.
That's fine. Then the next question afterwards is what factors have you seen differentiate a good project from a great project?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just clarity, right? There are uh, going back to the target analogy. There are projects that are on the edge that may have fit, but didn't do a very good job at conveying why. Great projects also would really address, how the path towards commercialization of their technology. So the technologies, you know, I think we don't give you a lot of space to really write the details of the algorithms that you will use or the techniques. You have to include that, but you don't get a lot of space for that. You do get a lot of space on to convince us that this will make an impact on Canada and will bring future benefits back to Canadians. And so if you're able to address those questions, especially addressing um, in convincing us that, if you're an early stage company, that you're able and capable of executing a large project, then that will make it a great application.
The next question asks, what's the likelihood of getting the higher Innovate funding phase, assuming their first phase is successful?
Yeah, so I didn't mention it. So this is the pilot fund, and the maximum reimbursement that we can give to companies is $150,000. But we do have a later stage fund called the Focus Fund, where the reimbursement maximum is $2 million. As you've seen from our project financial, our network financials earlier in this presentation, we only have about 1.6 million dollars left. So currently, with our funds, we don't plan on having another call for applications for the $2 million Focus Fund, but we are always in discussions. We would love to be refunded and continue our work, but that's we don't have any certainty.
The next question asks, if they want to contribute as a collaborator but not as a lead, is there any resources that they can use to find potential projects that they could be a part of?
Yeah, that's a good question. Unfortunately, we don't currently have a way for sort of matchmaking that in that sense. But if you want, we can't guarantee that we'll find you a collaborator, but send us an email with your details, and we'll see how we can help.
Our next question says, can we submit more than one application if they are working on several projects simultaneously and are also able to self-fund most of these projects?
Yes, the guide for applicants, excuse me, the guide for applicants lists out sort of project limits. Yeah, I think in general, if you're a decently sized company submitting one or two applications, or up to two to three really applications for a round is okay. I wouldn't submit any more than that. Probably two is my personal limit. Again, we want to make sure that you are focused on your task, and part of our mandate is to make sure that we provide funding not just to the top projects, but to a variety of different recipients across Canada. So in a limited round, we likely won't give three awards to one company.
And that is reaching the end of our Q&As.
Thank
Um,
you.
thank
Yeah, so I'll just go over a little bit of the FAQs here. We have a couple minutes left, so I will, you can still sneak in a few questions. Uh, uh, if you're applying for the full 150K as a company, you do not have to have $450,000 in your bank account ready to go, but you must, be able to convince us that you can spend enough money to achieve your goals. Does funding go to the company or the hospital? Every ultimate recipient must receive at least 10% back of their expenditures. Really use the budget worksheet, tweak contribution ratios to decide who can get paid and what amount. How flexible are budget and project milestones? In general, we are fairly flexible. So deviations of less than 10% per cost category in your budget are allowed without an amendment to your contract. But for larger budget changes, milestone delays, and project extensions, you need to let us know. We might need to update your contract. There's going to be a long time between April 2nd, when you apply, and July, mid-July, when you actually sign the contract. Things will happen in your company that may change things. So before signing your contract, there's still room to adjust things if needed. My company is incorporated in Manitoba, but it's owned by a foreign entity. Are we eligible? So this is my wishy-washy likely. So the company would be an eligible ultimate recipient, but we do have clauses in our agreement that limits when IP leaves Canada. So if it's a situation where the foreign entity requires all IP created by the Canadian entity to be assigned outside of Canada, then it's probably a no-go. Any other questions coming in, Christian?
There are not so far, so this is your last chance if anyone needs to sneak in a question before we end the webinar.
So, seeing none, I'd like to thank you all for your attention and for our live audience for asking some really great questions. Um, you can contact us, innovate@sunnybrook.ca. You can also email that address to get a copy of these slides. But for all the um, registrants to our live webinar, you'll get a copy of these slides in your emails sometimes this week. And you can find our direct email and LinkedIn profiles on the slides. You can also just visit innovate.ca to find more information about us. So let's stay connected either through email or by subscribing to our social feeds. Sign up for a monthly newsletter. There's a lot of information and lots of good news about the sector that goes out every month, and you won't get inundated with spam. It's fairly low touch, so please do sign up, find out more information about us, and good luck if you're applying. And don't be shy. We're here to help. Thank you.